Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Dunno here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. There we heard some of the action and atmosphere from a major farmer protest in Brussels on Monday. I'm joined by news correspondent with the Farmers Journal, Paul Mooney, who was in the middle of the protests. Paul, you're welcome. And why were farmers out in Brussels in such numbers?
Farmers were there, Patrick, because of falling farm prices for milk, pig meat, beef and other enterprises, and as a result falling cash flow and falling incomes. Patrick, there has been a series of protests taking place all around Europe over recent months, including in Dublin there about 10 days ago. So this was perhaps the culmination of that. A farm council of EU farm ministers was planned for Monday, and farm bodies right across Europe coincided with that, a big protest on the streets outside the EU headquarters where this meeting was to take place.
Tell me about the institutional meeting, I suppose, as it was called.
Yeah, it's a special meeting, or you could call it an emergency meeting of the...
Of course, an emergency meeting which was set a month ago.
Well, that's true, yes, but an emergency meeting of the Council of EU Farm Ministers called by Farm Commissioner Phil Hogan because of what has developed over the summer months, falling prices and the pressure on farm incomes. So that's what was held, and it was called specifically to discuss the issue of prices and incomes.
Of course, EU Farm Commissioner Phil Hogan, former Irish Environment Minister, was unable to attend, but he did put forward a package through his deputy. What did Phil Hogan and the package describe?
Yeah, the Commissioner had been put under pressure, Patrick, over recent weeks, and he had been lobbied by all the farm ministers around Europe, including our own Simon Coveney. He'd been lobbied by everybody, you might say. So he and his team had been working on a package, and it was presented yesterday at this meeting. The ministers did not know in advance what was going to be in it. Of course, they had a reasonable idea, and they all had their short list of items that they wanted in it, including 6 put forward by Simon Coveney. The package was unveiled yesterday. Now, specifically, it was presented as a €500 million package to help EU farmers, Patrick. And in conjunction with the 500 million, he also confirmed that he would be allowing member states to bring forward payment of the 2015 basic payment and greening payments. Not all member states are in a position to do so. Ireland probably will be in a position to bring forward and pay up to 70% of the payments from those schemes in the middle of October.
Perhaps the big ticket item which has been spoken about for quite a long time now, no lift in intervention prices though, despite the wide range of packages.
Yeah, looking at the 500 million package, it did not include, as you just said, any increase in intervention dairy prices, which certainly has disappointed farm bodies here, and the measures were elsewhere. So it came in 3 strands, Patrick. First of all, there will be direct payment support for dairy farmers across Europe to boost their cash flow and income. So that will be part of the 500 million. He did not break down, certainly not to the public anyway, how the 500 million will break down between that and the other 2 strands. That is the key one that our listeners will be interested in knowing. How much will they get by way of a once-off direct payment later on this year? The other 2 strands, Patrick, then, the second are measures to promote consumption of dairy and pig meat products, measures that are already in place, such as promotions in member states and whatnot.
Is that as simply as ad campaigns and that kind of thing?
Absolutely, it's that kind of thing, yes. And finally, it will also include extra spending on private storage of pig meat products and certain dairy products.
You say that there hasn't been much detail other than that. Is it still too early to say what will this mean for Irish farmers?
It is a little early. I mean, Commissioner Hogan had to battle fairly hard. His team were certainly saying that, and I would certainly accept that, to get that level of funding, €500 million, to help the farming sector at a time when there are many competing demands for EU resources, such as, for example, the refugee crisis there that's ongoing at the moment. So he did manage to get this across the line, this 500 million package, but the exact breakdown of how it will be utilised, how it will be divided between member states, has not yet been agreed. That debate will take place over coming days and weeks.
So what we do know that it is dairy, pig and grain farmers in particular that the support's to be there for.
Plus vegetable and fruit growers as well, more important maybe on the continent than here, or certainly the numbers are bigger. But Patrick, I would make the point, I think the lion's share of this 500 million package will go to dairy farmers.
And finally, Paul, you were right in the middle of this, and as I said, 6,000 farmers protesting, and we saw some pretty spectacular photos and videos of tractors pushing barricades and, water cannon, then retaliating. Just what was the sense of things on the ground? Was it all quite extreme, or was there, a good element there as well?
There definitely was tension. I was most of the time on the police side of the barricades, Patrick, and the police certainly were taking this very seriously. If you strayed too near their lines, for example, you were told in very short words to get back and get out of the way. There was a large number of farmers there, around the 6,000 mark, and you knew there was genuine anger on the part of farmers that reflected the pressure on farm incomes right across Europe. These farmers were angry. They were taking steps to let that clearly be known. They were lighting fires with straw. They were lighting tires. They were confronting the police, and it did get to the stage certainly of throwing bottles and stones and placards and whatever else was at hand at the police lines. So it did get quite angry and quite bad-tempered. The police were very, very heavily geared up in terms of riot shields and truncheons, and they had tear gas canisters, they had gas masks, they had guns with them. They had backup in the background of fully armed soldiers. They had armoured cars of all different types and police vans. And we're talking, I said there could have been maybe 1,000 police in this particular area of Brussels over the past 2 days in preparation for this. But there is another side to this, Patrick, that I would make, which is that the various different commissioner roles within the European Union all compete to take resources and money from the same budget. So it's a plain fact of life that those involved on the farming side, Commissioner Phil Hogan and his team, would have, while not wanting to see any violence or trouble, they would have welcomed a serious demonstration by farmers as strengthening their own case then, when they must sit down at the table in the room and do their own bit of fighting with their commission colleagues for the maximum share of the budget that they can get, because that's what goes on too,
Very good, Paul. And for in-depth analysis and reviews of the protests in Brussels, there's more in this week's Irish Farmers Journal, as well as online on www.farmersjournal.ie. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
There's been much discussion on rural crime in the past few days. This week we cover proposals for tougher sentences for burglars, as well as looking at communities affected by crime. Livestock theft, or rustling, remains a problem, especially for farmers along the border. Our digital editor, Thomas Schubert, spoke to Fergal Brady, an FPD sales executive in the border area.
FPD have started it about the first year of it. It's been demanded by farmers, so we've come up with a product specialising in covering farmers' livestock. So there has been a big uptake on it, and unfortunately there's been a large amount of incidences around the country where farmers have lost a large amount of money. So FPD is trying to produce a product that is needed by the farmers all around the country.
Is this an idea that came from you at FPD or from the industry?
I think it was pushed by the industry, and especially the IFA, and FPD has made a product that's suitable for farmers all around the country.
So say if I wanted to insure my cattle with FPD, how much would that cost me?
Well, it obviously depends on the livestock covers that you have in place already. You have to have a certain amount of livestock cover before you will get livestock cover, but it'll depend on the sums insured that you have. So it'll just be a matter of every farmer contacting their local FPD office, and it can be tailored to individual farmers' needs.
Any ballpark figure or a range of costs that
I think it's better. It's better for the farmer to contact the local office, because every policy is different in the point of view of what level of coverage is in place already. So it's a very simple phone call to the office, and they'll be able to tell them, in a moment's notice, what price it'll be to the farmer. It's just different on the sums insured and the livestock coverage already existing on the farm.
Now, if theft happens, how do you go about verifying the claims, or how long does it get to actually compensate the farmer in that case?
Obviously the first protocol in any theft is obviously to ring the guards or whatever like that, and obviously then there's a record kept, there's a herd register there, and obviously it's on a market value basis. There's an excess on each theft claim of €500 per incident, but apart from that there's no hidden clauses or anything like that. It's a very straightforward product. The only thing is that there's a €500 excess. Normally that there's cattle, when they're stole, it's not one animal, it's normally a bunch of animals, unfortunately. So it's just something small to protect FPD, but it's not on each animal, it's just per claim.
And you said really beef farmers are going for it, not so much dairy. Why is that?
Well, it's just there's been more incidents of beef cattle, and obviously we suspect that the beef cattle these beef cattle are being killed, and obviously it's been killed for one thing, it's for meat, it's not for their pedigree, it's not for that, so it's obviously more beef cattle. There has been incidents in dairy farms, but not to the extent of the beef farm. So it's obviously, if beef farmer has 30, 20 weanlings sitting in a field, if they're worth €7,000 to €1,000 a piece, very quickly you're into a large sums insured and a large loss if it occurs.
And as a new product, are you concerned that it could be abused, or some people could try to claim when they actually haven't had cattle stolen?
Well, I don't think it's possible, that easily, because obviously the animals have passports and everything like that. It's on herd registers. There's a large level of details there. But in fairness, farmers are very straightforward people. I don't see that there shouldn't be any cases of that so much. And if it is, obviously FBD have a rigorous fraud department. So if there's something like that, but I don't see, farmers are not like that. They're not that type of people. So I don't see that as being a major issue.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Cheers.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Now let's go to Achill Island, where Atlantic winds give lamb's meat a famously sweet taste. Making a living out of sheep farming is hard in that area, but Thomas Hubert spoke to one of the farmers and businessmen trying to market local meat as a top quality product.
You've probably read about the Calvi family in our pages before. They produce high-quality black-faced lamb on Achill Island in County Mayo, and they butcher it locally and sell the meat to restaurants and directly to the public across the country. Now another company, Cuir Acla, has started to use an abattoir on the mainland to kill and market gourmet lamb sourced from the island and the Carene Peninsula. Last weekend, I was lucky enough to taste it, cooked by the famous chef Richard Corrigan at his new hotel in Virginia in County Cavan, and it was divine. But this is also proving controversial because the Calvis have registered Achill as a trademark and nobody else is allowed to use that name to sell lamb meat. I met Cuir Acla's director Edward Johnston, who is from a sheep farm on Achill Island himself, and asked him about his business.
Well, the business started because of circumstances, really. Back in 2012, there wasn't a real viable market locally for selling our black-faced lambs. We were searching for buyers, they weren't coming, so some phone calls were made and we managed to get in touch with Ross Lewis of Chapter 1 in Dublin. He sampled our lamb and the rest is history. He looked for exclusivity on it the first year, which we gave him, and since then we've grown the market slowly every year, but gradually, and at this stage we supply a lot of the higher end restaurants in Dublin and Leinster particularly, and we've started to supply to London this year as well. So bit by bit we're growing it. This year we've also upped our offering to be able to supply to home buyers as well and people in the workplace.
So just for people to understand
Finally,
how you came to
Irish
do
Country
this,
Living is putting the
you're a
spotlight on
part-time
mouth cancer
farmer
ahead
from a
of
sheep
Special
farming
Awareness
family
Day next
yourself
week.
and also a
Journalist
lawyer,
Mary
so
Phelan
with
tells us
business
how a
connection,
Kildare
was
farmer
that how
lived through the disease,
the
but
two
only after he
sides
saw
of
his
the
whole
farming
life and
and
his farm
business
turned
came
upside
together,
down.
how you were able to develop this?
Yes, it was actually. It was just purely by chance. It was at a corporate business meeting where I was complaining about the circumstances of farming and how our lamb couldn't get sold. And I met with an old chef, a guy called Colin O'Daly. I happened to be sitting beside him at a corporate event. He was the former chef of Rowley's Bistro. So he put us in contact with Ross Lewis, and he's remained as an ambassador for the brand ever since, and has a lot of connections in the culinary world, and always speaks highly about our lamb because it is a quality product. The lamb speaks for itself, thankfully. You don't really have to sell it too hard, you know. Where
do you source the lamb? Who do you work with around your area in Achill, and how do you work with them? What's the format of the commercial relationship?
Format's very simple, really. We take supply of lamb from a number of about 40 farmers locally. They tend to get the stock to the correct standard themselves. They bring it to the abattoir that we've nominated in County Mayo, Carolyn's Butchers. They're slaughtered according to requirements. And we hang our product for 7 days. We find that dries the lamb out sufficiently to get the meat up to its absolute optimum. And it's a system that works quite well. We deliver once a week to Dublin and once a week to London.
Can you put any figures on this? How many lambs do you kill? How much turnover do you have?
Well, I certainly wouldn't be disclosing any information like that. It's that would be our business secrets. But Board B would tell you there's any amount of lamb on the island. There's about 11,000 lambs sold out of the Achill Island area in 2011. So there's quite a large market of lamb there to be tapped into. We're not anywhere near that. I might never get there in the end because there are other suppliers from the area doing as good a job as we are. But there's certainly enough lamb there to maintain a business, certainly for the medium to long term, you know.
And you said you're starting to sell directly to the public. You're
in a way trying to cut some of the middlemen in the chain, but at the same time you're creating a new middleman yourself. So how do you see your role in this chain? How are you different maybe from other suppliers? What is new in what you're doing now?
Well, I guess we are in the middle and we are on the chain, but we also have our hand on the product from its origin right to its actual delivery to the consumer. So we're part of the process from the very beginning. We're not buying it off anybody other than in its natural live state. We arrange for the slaughter, we arrange for its butchering, we arrange for its packaging, and we arrange for its delivery. And we are in touch with the end consumer to make sure that they get it exactly as they expect it. And we ensure quality control from the beginning right to the end. So it's definitely farm to fork, and all our paperwork can back that up.
What's special about the lamb from Michael Island, this black sheep lamb that you're selling? What about its quality?
Well, we've been told by our chefs that they find it's got a natural salty content in it, and we can only assume that that's coming off the forage that it's eating around the Achill Island area. Growing up on that lamb, we always killed our own lambs, we always ate it, and anybody from Achill would always tell you that they would be hesitant to buy lamb outside of Achill in restaurants because of, you know, having been used to eating our own all the time. So we always knew that it was a quality product without actually knowing why, but now the chefs are telling us why.
Okay, Ed, all the best for the future with your venture, and thanks for answering the questions.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Bye-bye.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Finally, Irish Country Living is putting the spotlight on mouth cancer ahead of Special Awareness Day next week. Journalist Mary Phelan tells us how a Kildare farmer made it through the disease, but only after he saw his whole life and his farm turned upside down.
John noticed a bit of a lump under his jaw on the right-hand side. It wasn't visible, you'd have to press it to feel it, and sometimes it seemed bigger, other times it seemed smaller. He thought it was just a swollen gland, and he didn't go to a doctor for about 3 or 4 months. However, after his GP referred him to a specialist, he then hoped it was just an infection, but it wasn't. He was diagnosed with having cancer at the base of his tongue.
When John was told he was diagnosed with the cancer, he was also told he was fully treatable and curable, but it posed many difficulties. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I mean, you know, to be fair, when he was given the diagnosis, he was told it was fully treatable and curable, so that's obviously very good news, but he still had to go through treatment, which was, you know, quite time-consuming and more than messed with his farming schedule. He says it was very difficult to work during so many hospital appointments. There was treatment going on during the harvest. He had to go to the dental hospital as well because some of his teeth had to be removed because he was doing radium therapy. So between doctor appointments, treatment and the dental hospital, John had 2 to 3 appointments a week, and sometimes he had to come back from getting his teeth out and get straight back up on the combine. And he says that the only reason the farm work actually did get done was thanks to a huge amount of help from his neighbours.
Yeah, because the treatment itself was tough on him, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really did take its toll. He lost 4 stone in the space of 6 weeks. He was in and out of hospital all of last October in particular because he was so sick. Then he got pneumonia before Christmas. Now, by Easter, he was feeling a lot better, but his energy levels are still not back. He now gets a checkup every 3 months. And really, I mean, we should all learn from John's story, and I guess that's the whole reason it's in Country Living this week and why we're going into so many details about his treatment and what exactly was wrong and the effect it had. You know, and John's advice is to get checked if there's anything there. Dentists are asking people if they have anything unusual in their mouth to go to their dentist or doctor without delay and get it checked out. For example, if you have a mouth ulcer that didn't heal, you need to get that investigated. If you have white or red patches in your mouth, if you have difficulty chewing or swallowing, any unexplained loosening of the teeth or any persistent sore throat or hoarseness, get it investigated. You really don't know if that's a symptom of a greater malaise. Even if you wear dentures, you should have a checkup. And what's very interesting is that on Wednesday of next week, dentists will give any clients who are booked in for dental treatment in their surgeries that day a free mouth cancer examination, and this is on Mouth Cancer Awareness Day.
And it's needed because, to be honest, before this came up in the Country Living agenda, I didn't know mouth cancer existed, so I think this is very useful. Is it common?
Yeah, no, I was the same. It's not something I was familiar with either before it was featured in Country Living this week, but there's 300 cases of it diagnosed every year. It is very curable if it's caught early, but the problem is that 50% of cases are caught at a relatively late stage, and then that's when the prognosis is quite poor. The causes for mouth, neck or head cancer are not fully known, but risk factors do include age, gender. Men are actually more likely to get it. If you're smoking, if you drink a lot of alcohol, exposure to the sun, your diet, the usual things really, I guess, that we're always hearing. But catching this particular cancer early does mean the difference between having maybe a small piece of your tongue or your cheek removed and having radical surgery. So, John has been very good to open up about his experience, and hopefully we can all learn from it, and have a read of the feature in Country Living this week, and if anything in it sounds like a bit too familiar or too close for comfort, make sure you get down to your doctor or particularly your dentist on Wednesday of next week, and you'll get a free check-up if you're having dental work anyway.
Okay, Mary, thank you very much.
No problem, Thomas.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.